The Turner house always looked warm from the outside, with soft porch lights glowing every evening and the faint smell of fresh coffee drifting through the kitchen window. Neighbors often said it seemed like the perfect homesteady, peaceful, predictable. But Emma Turner knew that a home could look calm on the outside while carrying quiet storms inside. She had lived in this house for 2 years now, ever since she married Ethan, a gentle, hardworking man who spent long hours at the architecture firm downtown. Their marriage was steady and respectful, even comforting, but it wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, filled with responsibilities, quiet gratitude, and the effort it took to build a blended family. The complicated part of that family had arrived 2 weeks earlier. Ethan's 22-year-old son, Luke, had moved back home after finishing college. Emma had been prepared for the adjustment. But she hadn't been prepared for how different Luke seemed from the cheerful boy she met briefly 2 years ago. Now he was quieter, more distant, and always lost in his thoughts. He wasn't rude, not even close. He was polite, soft-spoken, and always helped around the house. But there was something heavy in his eyes, something he tried hard to hide. Emma noticed it from the first night he walked through the door with just a backpack slung over his shoulder. His smile was thin, almost practiced. His hugs were quick, like he didn't want to draw attention to himself. When he spoke, his voice stayed low, careful, as if he was afraid to bother anyone. Ethan thought his son was just tired after college, that he needed rest. But Emma sensed something deeper, something Luke didn't want his father to see. She tried not to intrude. She told herself to give him space, to let him settle. But she found herself watching him with quiet concern. It's the way he stared at his phone with a troubled expression. It's the way he stayed in his room too long. It's the way he forced a smile during dinner when Ethan asked about his plans. Every detail felt like a small puzzle piece she didn't yet understand. One cold autumn evening, when the sky had turned pale gray and the smell of rain drifted through the yard, Emma stepped outside to bring in the cushions from the porch. That's when she noticed Luke sitting alone at the edge of the wooden steps. He had a notebook open on his lap, and he was sketching something with quick, tense strokes. His shoulders were hunched. His jaw was tight. The peaceful porch looked different. With him sitting there like a place someone came to escape rather than relax, Emma hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to make him uncomfortable, but she also didn't want to keep pretending everything was fine. She walked over quietly. "Hey," she said, her voice gentle. "Didn't expect to find you out here. It's getting cold." Luke looked up with a small jerk, surprised to see her. "Oh, yeah. I just needed some air." He closed his sketchbook quickly, almost hiding it. Emma noticed, but she didn't press him. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" she asked. He shook his head, and she took a seat beside him. For a moment, they just watched the neighborhood lights flickering on one by one. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A car passed with its headlights glowing against the pavement. It was quiet, but a heavy kind of quiet. "You've been pretty busy," she said softly, trying to keep her tone light. "Have you had any time for yourself? Any time to breathe?" Luke gave a short laugh. "I'm trying," he said, still figuring things out. That answer tugged at her heart. It was the kind of phrase young people used when they didn't want to explain what was hurting them. She recognized it because she had once used the same line at his age, when she felt lost, scared, unsure of who she was supposed to become. "Figuring things out can be hard," she said gently. "You don't have to do everything alone." He didn't look at her, but she saw his shoulders relax just a little. A sign that he appreciated her words, even if he wasn't ready to say anything more. They sat in silence again. But this time, the quiet felt different. It wasn't cold or distant. It was the kind of silence that felt safe, like a small pause in a world that moved too fast. Emma thought he might say more. Maybe open up a little, but he didn't. Instead, he stood after a few minutes, brushing off his jeans. "Thanks for sitting with me," he said softly. I should head inside." "Of course," Emma said with a warm nod. "I'm here if you ever need anything." He hesitated for a brief moment, so brief she wasn't sure she really saw it. Then he gave a faint smile and walked back inside. His steps were slow, thoughtful. She watched him go, feeling a deep sense of worry she couldn't explain. Something was going on with Luke, something he didn't want to show his father. Something he was carrying alone as she picked up the last porch cushion. The porch light flickered above her, casting long shadows across the wooden boards. It felt almost like a warning, or maybe a soft whisper of things about to change. She didn't know how and she didn't know when, but she felt it in her bones. The calm inside the Turner household was only temporary. She walked inside, closed the porch door behind her, and paused in the hallway. She listened to the quiet hum of the house, the refrigerator running, the faint footsteps upstairs, the soft breath of a home holding secrets. She didn't know what those secrets were yet, but she knew they were there, waiting, ready to surface. When the moment came, and without realizing it, she had just stepped into the beginning of a story that would shift the emotional balance of their home, binding them in ways none of them expected. The week after their porch conversation, Emma watched Luke with increasing worry. He woke early and returned late, always avoiding long conversations. He rushed through breakfast, pushed food around during dinner, and often disappeared into his room before Ethan even finished telling him about work. The house felt different with him moving through it like a shadow, quiet, restless, hard to read. Emma sensed him slipping deeper into something heavy. Ethan, busy with deadlines and meetings, didn't seem to notice. But Emma did. She saw the way Luke's hands shook when he texted someone. She saw how he stared at job websites and closed the tabs quickly whenever someone walked by. She saw the disappointment in his eyes each time he checked his email. Something wasn't right. One Thursday evening, sky turned dark earlier than usual, and rain pelted against the windows like impatient fingers. Ethan called to say he had to work late, leaving Emma and Luke alone in the house. She reheated pasta for dinner, setting 2 plates on the table, but Luke didn't come down. She waited, then finally walked to his room and knocked quietly. "Dinner's ready?" she said through the door. "Yeah, I'll be down in a minute," he answered, though his voice sounded rough, as if something was weighing on him heavily. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. She knew something was wrong. Emma walked back downstairs, only to find him sitting at the dining table after all, but not eating. His head was buried in his hands, his elbows pressed into the wood like he was trying to hold himself together. His breathing was slow but uneven. For a moment, she just stood there, surprised by how vulnerable he looked. Then she moved toward him quickly. "Luke," she said softly, "what's going on?" He lifted his face, and the sight hit her like a punch of sympathy. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from exhaustion. His expression looked defeated, like someone who had been trying to stay strong for too long. "I didn't want to worry anyone," he murmured, "especially Dad." Emma pulled out the chair beside him and sat down. She kept her voice calm. "You're part of this family. If something is wrong, you're not a burden." He stared at the table, struggling to find words. For a few seconds, only the rain filled the silence. Finally, he exhaled a shaky breath. "I lost my job last week." Emma's heart tightened. "I knew things were tough," she said gently. "'Kay, but I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't want to tell Dad," he said, voice cracking. "Kay was so proud when I graduated. And now I can't even pay my rent. My lease ends in 3 weeks, and I can't stay here forever. I've been applying everywhere. I've been trying. I'm just—" He stopped, swallowed, and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "I don't want him to think I failed," he whispered. Emma reached out without thinking and placed her hand on his trembling one. Her voice softened as naturally as breathing. "Luke, losing a job doesn't make you a failure. It happens to everyone. What matters is that you're trying." He closed his eyes briefly, as if her words gave him a moment of relief he desperately needed. "I might have to move out of state," he continued. "A friend said there might be work in Denver. Not much, but it's something." I don't want to leave, but I can't keep living here like I'm just taking up space. You're not taking up space, she said firmly. You're family. He opened his eyes again, and the shock on his face told her how long he had gone without hearing something like that. Emma took a steady breath. She didn't want to overstep. She didn't want to make a decision that belonged to Ethan. But she also couldn't watch someone so young collapse under pressure he shouldn't carry alone. She had been 22 once. She remembered nights crying quietly in her small apartment, hoping someone would help her. No one did back then. She refused to let Luke feel that same loneliness now. Luke, she said gently, you can stay here for as long as you need. His head jerked up. What? I mean it, she said. You don't have to pay rent. You don't have to rush to leave. This house is your home too. Take your time, find a job that fits you. You don't have to uproot your whole life because things got hard. He stared at her, confused, overwhelmed, almost emotional. But why would you do that for me? He asked, almost in a whisper. Because you matter, she replied. Because you're trying your best. Because I care. A long silence followed, but it wasn't cold. It felt warm, like something heavy was finally lifting off his shoulders. Thank you, Luke whispered. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said with a small smile. Just let yourself breathe a little. He nodded slowly, as if letting himself accept the offer. His eyes softened with relief, gratitude, something deeper, something unspoken but respectful. And then the moment froze. The sound of the front door unlocking echoed through the hallway. Ethan was home. Luke sat up straight immediately. Emma withdrew her hand calmly, not wanting to make anything look unusual. Ethan stepped into the dining room, shaking rain from his jacket. Everything okay here? He asked casually. Unaware he had walked in on an emotional moment. Luke forced a small smile. Yeah, just talking. Emma nodded, her heart steady but alert. She didn't know how Ethan would feel about the promise she had made. She didn't know how Luke would handle the conversation with his dad. But she knew one thing for certain. Tonight had changed something. The truth had finally come out. The struggle was no longer a secret. And in that fragile moment, as rain softened, outside and the house filled with quiet tension, Emma sensed that this was only the beginning of a deeper shift, one that would test their bonds. Challenge old misunderstandings and bring unexpected emotions to the surface. After Luke confessed everything, the rhythm of the Turner house shifted in a way none of them expected. He stayed just as Emma had encouraged him to. But staying brought new changes, quiet ones at first. He helped with groceries without being asked. He cleaned the kitchen after meals. He fixed the loose porch railing. He moved through the house with more ease, though every now and then Emma caught him watching his father carefully, as if waiting for disapproval that never came. Ethan assumed Luke was simply adjusting to being back home. He was busy with work, tired most evenings, and grateful that the tension from earlier seemed to have settled. But Emma saw more than Ethan did. She saw how hard Luke tried to rebuild himself. She saw how deeply he appreciated even small moments of kindness. And without meaning to, she began to admire his quiet strength. Their connection grew naturally, wasn't dramatic or inappropriate. It was simply two people understanding each other at a time when both felt alone in different ways. When Ethan worked late nights, Emma would often find Luke studying job listings in the living room. He looked determined but uncertain, as if every job description reminded him of something he had lost. One evening, she walked in with a cup of tea and placed it on the table beside him. "You've been staring at that screen like it owes you money." She joked gently. Luke laughed, a warm sound she rarely heard from him. "Feels like it," he said. "Everything I'm qualified for pays almost nothing. Everything that pays well wants 10 years of experience." "That's the world now," she said. "But don't let it scare you. You re-smart, you'll find something." He looked at her with gratitude, the kind that made his eyes soften. "You always say the right thing," he murmured. She shrugged. "Someone said those words to me when I needed them. I'm just passing them on." He closed his laptop and leaned back in the chair. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you figure things out when you were my age? You seem like you have everything under control. She smiled sadly. I didn't. I had no idea what I was doing. I just hit it well. Life doesn't come with instructions, Luke. We all learn as we go. He nodded, absorbing her words like someone who'd been thirsty for too long. Their conversations became easier after that. They talked about school memories, future dreams, embarrassing moments. Cooking, failures, small things that built trust without either of them noticing. But sometimes, the closeness caught them both off guard. It happened one afternoon when they were unpacking holiday decorations from the attic. The boxes were dusty and heavy. Luke carried most of them while Emma pulled out old garlands and lights tangled like vines. They laughed as they tried to untie them, sitting on the floor surrounded by glittering mess. You'd think we'd learn to store these properly, Emma said, shaking her head. Where's the fun in that? Luke replied, smiling. They worked side by side, their shoulders brushing occasionally, but each time they moved away quickly. Aware of the delicate line they walked on at one point, Emma stood on a small stool to reach the top shelf. The stool wobbled unexpectedly, and before she could regain balance, Luke caught her by the waist, steadying her firmly. Their eyes met. His hands dropped immediately, respectful, almost startled. Emma's breath caught not out of fear, but out of the sudden awareness of how close they were. You okay? He asked quietly. Yes, she said, stepping back. Thank you. The moment passed quickly, but the air felt different afterward, charged with something they both understood but didn't dare name. Later that night, Emma sat in her bedroom, the lights dim, thinking about the small shift she felt. She loved Ethan, and her marriage was steady. Her affection for Luke wasn't romantic, it was emotional, protective, a deep sense of wanting him to feel supported. But even innocent closeness can feel complicated when hearts are fragile. She knew she had to be careful. She didn't want to misunderstand her own feelings or allow Luke to misunderstand his. Meanwhile, Luke lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. He replayed the moment in the attic, the way she nearly fell. The warmth of her hand when he caught her, the softness in her voice when she thanked him. He wasn't confused about right and wrong. He respected his father, and he respected her even more. But he also couldn't deny that Emma had become the person who saw him, really saw him during one of the hardest moments of his life. The next day, things returned to their normal rhythm, though something quiet lingered beneath the surface. They spoke carefully, moved carefully, aware of the line between comfort and emotional closeness. But life had a way of pushing them back together. One snowy evening, with Ethan stuck at the office again, the power flickered off for a moment. The house dimmed, and Emma and Luke found themselves in the living room, candles casting soft light around them. Snowflakes pressed against the windows, thick and white. The house felt smaller, warmer, almost intimate. You ever get scared of storms? Luke asked, looking at the dark corners of the room. I used to, Emma admitted. But storms end. They always do. He nodded. I hope mine ends soon, too. She looked at him, her expression warm. It will. Don't rush it. Healing takes time. He smiled faintly. You talk like someone who's been through a lot. We all have, she said. We just don't always show it. Their eyes met again, brief, calm, honest. No tension, no inappropriate thoughts. Just understanding. Deep human understanding. Neither of them knew that halfway down the staircase, Ethan had paused. He had come home quietly, snow still clinging to his coat, and heard just enough of their soft conversation to make something inside him tighten with confusion. Not jealousy, not suspicion, just a strange sense that something between them had grown deeper than he realized. He didn't interrupt. He stepped back into the hallway, uncertain about how to feel. The storm outside continued, the snow falling heavier. And the Turner household stood in a complicated stillness, three hearts moving in different directions, all tied together by family, uncertainty, and unspoken emotions that none of them fully understood yet. The morning after the snowstorm, the Turner house felt unusually quiet. Ethan woke early, moving slowly through the kitchen with a heavy mind. He had heard pieces of Emma and Luke's late-night conversation, enough to sense something emotional beneath the surface. He didn't hear anything inappropriate, just a softness in their voices that made him realize how far he had drifted from understanding his own son. That thought bothered him more than anything else. He poured himself coffee and stared at the window, watching snow melt into small streams along the edge of the porch. He wasn't angry, he was simply unsettled. He wondered how long Luke had been struggling without telling him. He wondered how often Emma had filled the emotional space he had failed to see. He loved his family, but somewhere along the way he had become too busy, too tired, too far removed. He didn't like that version of himself, not as a father, not as a husband. Emma walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, dressed in a sweater, her hair tied loosely. She could tell immediately that something was wrong. Ethan wasn't reading emails or checking his schedule like usual. He was just standing there, holding his coffee, lost in his thoughts. "You okay?" she asked softly. He looked up, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, I think we need to talk." Emma's heart jumped, but she nodded and sat down at the table. Ethan joined her. His eyes were kind but serious. "Is something going on with Luke?" he asked gently, not accusing, not harsh, just seeking the truth. Emma breathed out slowly. She understood what he meant, and she also knew he had the right to know everything. She didn't want him assuming anything that wasn't true. "Yes," she said, "but not in the way you probably think." Ethan leaned forward. "Tell me." She explained everything: the job loss, the financial stress, the fear of disappointing him, the pressure Luke had been quietly drowning under. She told him about the nights Luke stayed up searching for work, the way he blamed himself, the way he avoided conversations because he didn't want to burden anyone. She mentioned her offer the chance for Luke to stay rent-free until he found stability. She expected Ethan to be upset, but instead he bowed his head, shame washing over his face. "I should have noticed," he whispered. "I should have been there for him." Emma reached out gently. "You were busy, Ethan. You didn't ignore him. You just didn't see it. That happens. What matters is that you're here now." He nodded, still troubled. "I don't want him to feel like he has to hide things from me. I don't want him to feel closer to you than to his own father." Emma's voice softened. "He doesn't. He loves you. He just didn't want to disappoint you. You're his dad. Your opinion means everything to him." Ethan took a long breath, letting the truth sink into him. Meanwhile, upstairs, Luke paced his room. He had barely slept. The warmth from last night's conversation with Emma had helped him feel seen, but Ethan's sudden quietness when he came home had worried him. He hated the idea of causing tension. The last thing he wanted was to be the reason his father and stepmother argued. He cared about both of them too much. After a few minutes of pacing, he finally convinced himself to go downstairs. When he reached the bottom step, he saw them sitting together at the table. They weren't arguing, they weren't tense. They looked serious but calm. That surprised him. "Hey," Luke said quietly. Both of them looked at him with soft expressions. "Morning," Ethan said, his voice gentle in a way Luke hadn't heard in a long time. Luke sat down slowly. Uncertain. Ethan didn't waste time. "Emma told me everything." Luke's stomach dropped. He waited for disappointment, frustration, maybe even anger. Instead, Ethan let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he said. Luke blinked, confused. "Why are you apologizing?" "'Cause I should have known you were struggling," Ethan said. "You're my son. I should have asked more questions. I should have checked in. I should have been here." Luke's chest tightened. "Dad, no, I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want to make things harder." "But you don't have to carry everything alone," Ethan said. "Not here. Not in this house." For the first time in months, Luke felt his father's care, not through words of advice or expectations, but through genuine emotion. It softened him instantly. "I didn't want you to think I failed," Luke admitted. "You didn't fail," Ethan said firmly. "Life gets messy. Jobs come and go. What matters is that you're trying. We're here to help." Emma added softly, "You're not alone, Luke." The words hung in the room like warm light. Luke lowered his head, fighting back tears. Not because he felt weak, but because he felt safe for the first time in a long while. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay here, for as long as you need. No deadlines, no pressure." Luke looked up, his voice barely steady. "Thank you, both of you." A deep calm settled into the room, the kind that comes only after truth is finally spoken. Over the next hour, they talked openly about jobs, plans, fears, hopes. It wasn't a dramatic conversation. It was a healing one, the kind families rarely have but always need. When they finished, the sun had risen higher, casting warm light across the living room. The storm outside had passed. The snow glistened under a clear sky, and something inside the Turner household had shifted to Dot, not into something romantic, not into something complicated, but into something honest. A family who had been drifting had finally found the courage to reconnect. In the days that followed, their home felt different, lighter. Luke no longer moved like a shadow. Ethan made time for longer talks. Emma stepped back slightly, giving father and son space to rebuild their bond. But she remained a warm presence, steady and supportive. One evening, as they sat in the living room with a movie playing softly on the TV, Luke looked at both of them and smiled a real smile, full of peace. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged. For the first time in a long time, the Turner family felt whole, and it all began with one unexpected offer. And three hearts brave enough to face the truth together.